Welcome everyone to the November Elevate. This is our last session of the year. We are working on the schedule for 2025. It will still be on the third Thursday of the month, and I did already check the payroll calendars. There's one conflict in September, so we'll probably just cancel that one, but we'll get that scheduled out here in the next couple of weeks. So thanks everyone for joining us. Today we have Brad Mathers from Employee Relations, and he's going to talk to us about employee terminations and discipline. So I will turn over to Brad.
Okay, thank you, Deanna. Nice to see everyone here. This is a privilege for me to talk to this group and sort of crash your November Elevate. And we're going to talk, Deanna has asked me to talk about terminations, but we're going to talk about some broader topics, just kind of maybe what leads up to the different separations. So I do have some slides I'll share here. Okay, are we seeing those? Great. Can never be too sure. All right. So I know a lot of you are supervisors, and at a minimum, many or most of you advise supervisors on how to supervise. So this is kind of a toolbox for all of that, whether you are supervising yourself or advising on. So a question that my office gets a lot is, when do we have to involve central HR? When do we have to involve employee relations and performance? Or what can we do in-house? So I created this sort of continuum to sort of describe that, sort of in terms of kind of what you would see or what would come your way, or if you're supervising, what issues you're dealing with. So our general philosophy is that we try to apply the most informal option first, and with the hope that that works and resolves the concern. So when a supervisor first identifies some sort of performance issue, as long as we're not talking about a really egregious issue or a policy violation or illegal conduct or something of that nature, just kind of routine performance issue, we generally advise that supervisor employee coaching is the best first step, and that the supervisor should be documenting that informally, even though we're not doing sort of formal letters or anything at that point. We do want these interactions documented. It's certainly to everyone's benefit that these interactions are documented. So the sort of cadence of that is the supervisor should meet with the employee, describe what the concern is, or the issue or the incident, try to describe that in sort of objective, concrete terms, okay? Which can be tricky when it comes to behavior, but if we're talking about behavior, quote the person or describe what the behavior looked like to an observer. Ask the employee for their perspective, set the expectations for each concern, and then follow that up with an email just memorializing the meeting and what was discussed. And what that has accomplished is, if this issue persists, and you do reach out to my office, one of the first questions we're going to ask you is, how good is your documentation? What does documentation look like? And we're kind of going to be asking for these follow-up emails if we're just talking about informal issues. So I have that in gold and black, go Buffs. I have that in gold because I sort of think of it as these sorts of things could be happening every day, all day in your individual units, you wouldn't need to reach out to us. And a lot of things can be resolved just through that sort of routine. Okay. Where you might need to involve or should involve my office is when you are observing an issue that either hasn't improved or it's a more serious issue that needs to be addressed more formally. We can assist you with either a performance improvement plan or a letter of expectation, which is much the same of sort of that informal interaction that I just described, but it's in writing, and it certainly comes across more seriously to the employee. And it's not a very fun letter to issue or receive or be involved in, because it's not a warm and fuzzy sort of letter. It just focuses on concerns. So common question, what is the difference between a performance improvement plan and letter of expectation? Well, I tend to think of it in terms of how great is your patience with the issue? How much time do you want to give the employee to improve? How much have we invested in this employee? How badly do we want this to work out? Or are you at the point where sort of exit is imminent, and you want to safeguard against that eventuality? So a performance improvement plan might be more appropriate if you want to give the situation more time. You want to give the employee more time and runway to demonstrate improvement. And the letters read very similarly, but performance improvement plan tends to be a little bit softer, and a typical length of time to give somebody to improve might be in the 3 to 9 month range. So where a performance improvement plan might hold the most value is right after performance evaluations that you conduct, either PRISMs in December or staff and other evals in January, February, et cetera, where the employee's not floundering, but you want to emphasize a certain couple of areas that certainly need to improve before the next performance evaluation. By the way, please pause me if you have any questions. I can't see if there's any chat going on, but I'm going to assume I'm good. So a letter of
Monitor the chat for you.
I'm sorry?
We'll monitor the chat for you.
Thank you very much. Letter of expectation tends to be a more sort of urgent or dire, serious sort of situation. Typically 1 to 3 months is given to the employee to improve. And like I said, it's not fun for the employee to receive, but the purpose is to help the employee be successful. Basically, here's the roadmap for how you go from not meeting our expectations to meeting or exceeding these expectations. But if the employee is unable to do that in that length of time, then it makes a much more defensible situation for the supervisor or for you to look at disciplinary action, which could mean termination. It could mean suspension without pay. It could mean demotion. It could mean reduction in FTE. And at that point in time, we would expect that you're working with my office on that.
So we do have a couple of questions. The first one is the choice between a PIP and an LOE at the manager's discretion?
Absolutely. Absolutely, manager's discretion. We want supervisors to feel empowered and like they're the ones driving this process. We're really kind of helping with some of the kind of the foundation of what they're trying to instill, or communication, whether it's written or verbal, to help support the point they're trying to get across. It's really hard for the supervisor to do everything, but we do like to empower supervisors to sort of choose between the options that are available to them.
Okay, and then the next question is, when you say informal documentation, should that just be an email recapping the meeting that the supervisor then saves, or do you recommend it be documented in a performance evaluation?
Email is perfectly sufficient, and I find to be the easiest for everyone involved, because really the most important thing about that informal documentation is that the employee is receiving it. Okay. So one of the things that we try to safeguard against, and I'll get to a little bit later, is we want to be transparent about expectations. Okay. And if we end up having to terminate somebody, if that employee has an argument that they didn't know what was expected of them, and we can't demonstrate that that was in writing, then the employee has an argument that we never set the expectation, even if you met with them and had verbal discussions 100 times. Okay. Or like I see a lot, maybe you're keeping a Word document just to yourself about all the issues going on, but you're not sharing that with the employee. That's a one-way conversation that the employee is not privy to, or that they could later argue never happened. So an email is probably the best and easiest way, because an employee can't make the argument that they didn't receive the email or didn't know what was expected of them.
And they're asking for clarification on what's the difference between a PIP and an LOE.
Sure. So just to kind of recap that, a PIP generally means that we have more patience with the situation. Maybe that the concerns are not as serious or egregious, that we don't need immediate improvement. Maybe this is a situation where we've invested in this person and we want to give it more time to resolve. Letter of expectation, typically shorter patience, and not in every situation, but the supervisor is typically envisioning a possibility of termination in that instance. Any more?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, good questions. So these are all types of disciplinary actions. And in terms of employment law, these are all adverse actions. Okay, we're decreasing somebody's pay or their status or their tenure, or we're ending their employment. Those are all adverse actions, which have ramifications in terms of some of our other policies. So retaliation, for example. Retaliation is where somebody takes some sort of protected activity, okay, like making an ethics line complaint, or requesting FML or family, or asking for an accommodation, some sort of protected activity. And on top of that, there's an adverse action that happens subsequent to that, that the person claiming retaliation is tying the two together. So that's why these are important to involve us, because we'll sort of help sort through whether or not that we need to be concerned about giving an adverse action. Since we're getting close to evaluations, I just wanted to kind of point out a few things about what options are available to staff and faculty. So university staff who receives a below expectations evaluation, a 1 or a 2, we recommend a PIP or an LOE. Those aren't required. Again, supervisor discretion on that. But we're happy to sort of help talk through your options there. University staff can write a rebuttal letter to a letter of expectation, or to a PIP, or to their evaluation. But there's no formal process that sort of screeches everything to a halt while we resolve it. If you give a letter of expectation to an employee and they refuse to sign it, or they write a rebuttal, the letter of expectation is still in effect. the employee is basically just kind of providing their input to it. But that action, whatever it is, PIP, LOE, evaluation is in effect. Faculty can appeal performance evaluation ratings of a 1 or a 2. Faculty cannot appeal a 3 or a 4 or a 5. And School of Medicine in particular has its own policy around this. That faculty member who gets a 1 or a 2 disagrees with that and wishes to appeal, they need to notify in writing the department chair and the dean of the School of Medicine. And then there's a formal process that follows. And a faculty member who receives a 1 or a 2 must receive a PIA, Performance Improvement Agreement, which is different than a PIP or an LOE. PIA is something very specific to faculty. And my team is not involved in those, but we have seen instances where there is a PIA in place, and parallel to that, there is a PIP or an LOE in place. So you can do both, because a PIA generally looks at sort of a full evaluation year, rather than we need improvement sooner than that. That a PIP or LOE would provide.
Okay, we've got a bunch of questions now. What if an employee is on a PIP or an LOE and then they try to transfer to another unit? Can we reach out to the department if the reason is a behavior concern?
Reach out to the new unit that just hired them?
Yeah, Danielle, you want to come off of mute and explain?
Yeah, if they had already been, we see that there's a transfer going through and stuff, but it's, more on a behavior thing, that we believe would still continue.
That's a good question, Danielle. I would say you can use your discretion on that. We would hope that before they hired this person, that they went through a proper reference check process and possibly spoke to the supervisor in your unit while making a decision. Sometimes as business partners, you talk to each other about these sorts of things. Sometimes you contact my team and sort of say, do you have any concerns about this candidate? You can reach across the aisle like that. If it's already at the transfer stage, that means that there's been a hire in place. So I think you just kind of want to be mindful about kind of on one hand, here's our feedback. On the other hand, we do want to give that employee the best chance at getting a fresh start somewhere else and being successful there.
Yeah, because just the case we're thinking of, it would have ultimately been a termination, which then would have shown up, for the unit, that probably they wouldn't have gotten hired at that point. But yeah, just was interested with that. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, there was a request for the PIP template. Thank you, Lindsay. What is our obligation to inform individuals that they have the option to submit a rebuttal?
Well, it's typically something we'll discuss with the supervisor and business partner when we're drafting the letter, whatever it is. We like to mention that a rebuttal is their primary recourse, and also this triple asterisk statement on the bottom there, they're not required to sign it. So I would say, you can sort of use your best judgment. Most employees, are typically pretty quiet. They take it in stride and would not have a formal response. But typically an employee will let you know that they want to rebut. They may not use that language, but they'll say, well, I disagree with this letter. What are my options? And either you or the supervisor can provide them with that option.
Okay, and then another question about the rebuttals. Is the information ever investigated further, and does a rebuttal ever result in a PIP or an LOE being overturned?
I haven't seen one get overturned. What we'll ask when we receive it, sometimes the employee wants to send them to my team because they don't want the supervisor to see what they wrote in it. Sometimes they'll send it straight to you, the business partner. Sometimes they'll send it straight to the supervisor. What we'll ask you to do is look at it and see if there's anything substantive in their rebuttal that would cause us to either edit or remove or redact anything that's in the letter. So I have seen instances where, let's just say Brad is getting a letter of expectation, and I'm supposed to do 12 Elevate trainings during the year, one each month, and my supervisor gives me an LOE because they think I only did 10 out of the required 12. And then I, in my rebuttal, say, well, here's the 12 that you asked me to do, and in fact, I actually did 14. Here's all of those instances. I've seen cases where that sort of data comes in, and then the letter is modified and reissued with whatever that issue is removed from the letter.
Okay, what if there is a more serious issue that is affecting patient care now, right, as PRISM is being done? Can we do an LOE now, or better to do the eval first with a 1 or a 2 and then do the LOE?
Yeah, excellent. Either or. You could, I mean, and this is the sort of time of year when I think supervisors realize, like, oh gosh, I have to do an evaluation soon. I probably should have done something more earlier in the year, and then they try to sort of play catch up this time of year by doubling up on letters and evaluation. But you can take either approach. You can if it's an urgent issue like patient care, you may not want to wait until January to address it. You probably want to do it now. And you can either take that informal route, or you can work with us on a letter, which you would be reviewing in part in their evaluation meeting in a couple of months, or even in about a month. But if that doesn't sort of make sense on your calendar, or maybe it's not an emergent issue like patient care, you can just kind of hold off and then write your performance evaluation, and then the letter, or the PIP or LOE would be sort of paired with the evaluation. So you'd basically be telling the employee, let's just say you're giving them a 2 out of 5, and that this letter is basically due to the concerns that were in their performance evaluation, and the clock would kind of start on that from the evaluation meeting.
Then the next question is, can you confirm whether the hospital needs to be involved when credentialed medical faculty receive a PIP or an LOE or put on a PIA?
They don't need to be involved unless those items are at stake or being directly impacted. I find that in cases it's nice to notify them as a courtesy, but it's ultimately our employee and our process and your decision in terms of what's going to happen with the employee. But certainly they need to be notified if credentialing or licensing or anything like that is at stake.
Then can an involuntary demotion or a PIP be given without the informal documentation taking place first?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you go straight to a PIP or an involuntary demotion without doing informal documentation first?
Potentially, that's a bit of a case-by-case decision. A supervisor who's really good at that sort of pattern of informal discussion, follow up with an email, and sort of does that reflexively, you know, they may come to us and say, I'm at my wit's end with this employee, and we'll ask for the documentation. And if there's a stack of those follow-up emails, oftentimes that's akin to a letter of expectation, because again, the email is basically a written expectation. If the employee keeps violating written expectations, that's just as compelling as if they did not adhere to the expectations in a formal letter. So it kind of depends on how good the documentation is, but yeah, we see that.
Okay, I think that's it for this moment.
Okay, thank you. So just to kind of recap, what are we even talking about, Brad, in terms of types of separation? So this gray box is voluntary separation, resignation, retirement, or transfer. Certainly don't need to involve myself or my team on any of those. But these gold boxes are involuntary types of separation. So term for cause, whether that's performance, policy violation, falsifying job application materials, myriad reasons for termination for cause. Again, we want to be your partner in working through those. Exhaustion of leave. Employee has exhausted their FML, their family, they're sick, their vacation. Okay. An employee can be separated in that instance. However, it's a bit of a process. Deanna can attest to, actually. We typically have a very structured notice letter that basically puts the employee on notice what their situation is. You're out of all these leaves. We could potentially be facing a difficult decision, and one of them is potentially separation for exhaustion of leave. And then we give the employee some time to either demonstrate that they can return, or when they can return. Perhaps there's an ADA accommodation that is the solution. Perhaps they're seeing their doctor later that week, and the doctor's about to give fitness to return paperwork to them. So, but please work with us on those situations. Layoff is another common one. 3 types of layoff: lack of funding, lack of work, or reorganization. And job abandonment. Job abandonment is where an employee is scheduled to work, but they no call, no show for 3 straight days or more. And we can terminate on day 4 of that scenario. We will typically ask you, have we been trying to reach out to them? Have we heard anything from this employee, etc.? They really need to be ghosting you, though, for 3 days. So an employee calling out sick for 3 days, or they call out sick on day 1, no call, no show day 2, call out sick on day 3. We are still hearing from them. So they haven't abandoned their job in that instance. Any questions on these? Okay. So one of the sort of mandates that my office is given is to weigh the risk involved with separating somebody. And these are just some of the sort of risk factors that we have to consider, that you can sort of think about yourself in terms of, would this be a risky separation, or what else might be required from us as an institution in order to get to a place where the risk is as low as possible. There's never 0% risk, no matter what, but sometimes there's a lot more risk than in other instances. So obviously protected class concerns, discrimination, allegations, harassment, hostile work environment, FML retaliation. Perhaps we didn't offer FML when we should have. They're currently on FML, protected leave or family. Okay. We can still potentially take action if they're on a protected form of leave, but we just need to be very careful, mindful about that, have a lot of discussion about what the situation is. But a layoff, for example, could occur when somebody's on FML, because the business needs just mandated that the layoff occur, and it had nothing to do with the employee being on leave. ADA, or Americans with Disability Act, sort of issues, and that office resides in my office as well. So if an employee made some sort of accommodation request that we didn't respond to appropriately, we didn't refer them to the ADA coordinator, perhaps we made informal accommodations that we want to sort of back out of or take away, that can be a problem. If there's a current accommodation request underway, if the interactive process is still underway, that can be a risk factor. Probably the number one reason is lack of documentation or poor documentation. So like I said, that's going to be one of the first questions we'll ask in these situations. And if you have no documentation and you want to terminate an employee, you're not going to get a no, but you're going to get a we would not recommend this.
So there's a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Oh, so there's a question. So if a faculty member has been given their non-renewal letter, can you proceed with the termination when the effective date comes with the notice not to renew, serving as the documentation for the term relative to the processes?
Yeah, really good question. So with faculty who are not at will, who are limited or indeterminate, they are, in order to terminate them, we have to give a certain amount of notice to them. And there's a formula for that. There's a region policy that dictates how much notice we have to give somebody. And it relies upon how long they've been here. So it can be 6 months or a year or 3 months, kind of depending on how long the faculty member's been with us. If we are giving notice of non-renewal, that is in effect a termination letter that is just sort of ticking. And once that effective date happens, yes, the appointment is ending right then and there. You can also convert that limited or indeterminate faculty to at will. It also requires that same schedule of notice from Regent policy.
Okay, that's all that's in there right now.
Okay. All right. Something else that could increase the risk of separation is if the employee can make the argument that they didn't know what the expectation was, because we can't point to something in writing that says, here's the deadline, or here's what your schedule is, or, stop doing X, Y, and Z. Okay? If nothing is in writing, then the employee can potentially make that argument. So I know that one of the things Deanna wanted me to talk about was kind of, how to have these just sort of difficult discussions with employees in these moments, maybe where you're giving a letter, or you are considering termination. And I'd like to give my unpaid endorsement to what I think are the two best trainings on campus for supervisors and leaders: Crucial Conversations, Crucial Accountability, which is the sort of 2.0 course of that. We also provide a performance management training. Just gave it yesterday. I think the next one's in January. I think another one in February. If the issue that you're looking at is more about sort of people not getting along or the business relationship being intractable or difficult to navigate, we have a rather new resource on campus called the Office of Adaptable Resolution that Will DeWeese heads, that will do mediation on campus and other sorts of issue resolution. So I really try to get the word out about that. I did put the Ombuds office on here. They really don't do mediation anymore. It's Ombuds office is basically a confidential place to vent, but they don't resolve any issues and they don't do mediation anymore. But there's still potentially a resource if somebody wants a 100% confidential place to go to simply vent. Office of Faculty Relations is formerly known as the Office of Professionalism, handles faculty professionalism concerns. And if the issue you're dealing with pertains to a faculty member and it is basically exclusively a professionalism issue, poor interpersonal skills, poor communication, profane language, learner mistreatment, other things like that, then Abby Laura in the Office of Faculty Relations might be the best place for you to start. You might be working with myself or my team if professionalism is one of the issues, but it's not the prime issue. Okay, you might be looking at a faculty member who has patient safety concerns. Perhaps they have productivity concerns. They're not sort of funding themselves appropriately. And if professionalism is a layer of that, you might be working with my team. But if professionalism is the key concern, Office of Faculty Relations is a great place to start. Okay, so that's it for sort of my slide material, but I'm happy to sort of field additional questions and talk through sort of sorts of scenarios that you're seeing.
You can go ahead and take yourself off mute if you have a question for Brad.
Hey, Brad, this is Betsy. I do have a question. If an employee requests to have their LOE removed from their file, so for example, if the issue is resolved and they say, things are better now, could you remove that? My thought is no, because it happened and we should keep documentation, but I'm wondering if your office has a different recommendation.
Sure. Hi, Betsy. Thanks for that question. So yeah, we generally recommend that letters of expectation don't be removed unless it's well in the rear view mirror, 1, 2, 3 years back or more. By that point in time, the supervisors conducted a few performance evaluations, and there's been a whole lot of performance since then that it may not even be relevant anymore. But oftentimes, either the employee is asking or the supervisor just sort of reflectively will issue this letter, which isn't easy to craft, as you know. And then after 30 days or 60 days, they'll say, you've been doing great, you're no longer on the letter. And we'll go like, no, don't say that. Because you want it in place, even if the person is doing great, just as sort of a fallback option, just to take it out every so often. And then at performance evaluation time, that's the time to sort of recap how they responded to it. And but I wouldn't suggest even considering removing it from a file within a calendar year of it being issued.
Okay. Yeah, I've tried to, employees, they do take it seriously. They think they're in trouble. I try to say, you know, this is not widespread. This stays in your personnel file and with central HR, but it's not being broadcasted. So I'm trying to sort of downplay it in terms of, it's not that big of a deal that it's in your file. I guess the solution I've come up with is you can write a rebuttal and it will be attached to it, and both of those will be in your file. But when they say just completely remove it, that's like erasing the past, and that just doesn't seem right to me. But I'm glad to know about your timeline recommendation. If it's been a couple years, that's something to consider. Thank
Sure.
you.
Sure, and you actually bring up something that I wanted to touch on is a letter of expectation or performance improvement plan. It does not affect pay, it does not affect status, does not affect tenure, so it's not an adverse action. So it actually does not go into the official personnel file in central HR.
Oh, okay.
It'll live in your departmental file, but if the person is trying to apply to other positions on campus and those prospective hiring authorities are peeking into their personnel file, like they should, the LOE will not be in there.
Okay.
Hey, Brad, this is Thomas Roller from Ortho HR. I'm curious, and this may be kind of outside of the purview of employee relations because it would be such an extreme edge case, but I'm wondering about those like edge cases where you have an employee who's like the malfeasance goes beyond professional, and we're talking about something where like they've been threatening other employees, or maybe they stole university property. It's never happened in the current job I have, but it's happened at my last one. So I'm just curious on what the guidance might look like from ER or whichever other university body in those sorts of cases.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I would suggest that you not work in isolation if you're seeing those sorts of issues. Utilize my team, and we'll probably involve University Council if it's serious enough. But things like dishonesty and theft are very serious issues, and tend to not categorize them as unprofessionalism. They tend to be kind of their own categories.
Yeah. Okay.
Would
That
that
answer
be
your
would that be something that we even just, first actions, like if we're like, okay, they shouldn't have badge access anymore, so we just contact badging, some immediate things, while we're waiting on getting connected with you guys?
Oh, if there's kind of a workplace violence concern?
Yeah, just sort of something of like, these extreme cases, if we're not like, what do we do that second when we hear about it, I guess.
Sure. Well, there's some people on this call who I've talked to about that just recently. I would say, again, don't handle that in isolation. You can put the person on paid administrative leave just to kind of catch your breath. And the reason why it's paid administrative leave is because if you're paying them, it's not an adverse action. So they can't say that it's retaliation or arbitrary, capricious, et cetera. If we're paying them, we can allocate them however we want, to include having them just be sidelined while we sort of figure out what's going on. So if it's workplace violence, my team very well may be doing an investigation pertaining to the anti-violence policy on campus. So again, make sure you're kind of picking up the bat phone and getting a team effort behind what you're looking at.
I guess, Brad, that'd be my only follow-up is the paid admin leave, because I know that usually factors in on cases like those. So departments have like their own autonomy to just initiate that paid leave status in HCM without like obviously we would still talk to employee relations, but in the event that like we just need to make sure the person's not coming into work, like where do the boundaries lie for what we can and can't tell people to do? If we say like go home, you'll keep getting paid, obviously we would loop you guys in on that. I just want to know like order of operations for what happens first.
Sure. So unpaid admin leave is akin to a suspension. So you would need to involve us for that, because it's an adverse action. You as business partners and leaders and resources to your units, you can make that decision internally and kind of come to us later and say, we put this person on leave yesterday or a couple of days ago, and just need your help navigating it. I would just sort of warn you, or just caveat that a little bit. When you put somebody on paid admin leave, you generally want to kind of have a strategy for what the off ramp might be for that. So like if two people get into an argument in the hallway, you want to be mindful about kind of what you're doing with the parties, but if you put one of the parties on paid admin leave, you're going to want to sort of think about what would the circumstances look like for us to bring that person back? What would sort of need to be satisfied?
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And arguments in the hallway, that's something that's like more case by case. I'm talking about just like extreme edge cases, like I said, theft, credible threat of violence, and obviously that's horrifying, but if that ever does happen, I just don't want to be caught flat-footed.
Sure. And I saw that somebody put in the information for the FAST team, Faculty Staff Threat Assessment Team, and I appreciate that, because the FAST team handles concerns that are really at the most emergent level: threat to self, threat to others, grave disability, and that is a whole separate team of HR, University Council, police, psychiatry, Office of Equity that meets to manage cases of that nature.
Cool. Great. Thanks so much.
Okay, and then we do have one in the chat. As reviews are coming up, if someone got a 2 last year and an LOE was put in place and they're going to get a 2 again this year, do you have a protocol recommendation, or would this be manager discretion on next steps to either extend the LOE or separate them?
Good question. Manager discretion. Feel free to reach out to us to sort of explore options or maybe revisit your strategy, but manager discretion.
Brad, this is Jean. If we put someone on either paid or unpaid administrative leave in the system, those transactions have to be approved by your team or someone else outside of us. So don't we, I mean, even if we have the discretion to do that, we would have to almost immediately reach out to your team because you would have to approve that transaction in the system, correct?
Yeah, hi, Jean. If we're not already working with you and we see one of the actions come through, and we're not familiar with it, we'll probably reach out to you to get context on it. But yeah, our team does approve all of these involuntary termination actions. Resignations auto-approve, right? Retirements auto-approve, transfers auto-approve. But involuntary separations, my team has to approve, and those leave rows, yes. Thank you, Jean.
Brad, could you talk through some what job abandonment looks like with somebody who works remote?
Oh, that's a good question, Wami. It basically looks like they are not showing up to meetings. There's no evidence that they're working. We're not hearing from them. Supervisors proactively reaching out, sort of saying, "Are you okay? What is your status? Are you working today? Are you planning on coming in tomorrow?" And getting ghosted on all of those fronts for at least 3 days. So, yeah, someone who's remote, a little more difficult maybe to contact them, but hopefully we have their phone, we have their email. Supervisor has some preferred way to communicate with them, text or phone or what have you. And you're not required to separate for job abandonment in that scenario, but again, supervisor discretion. But we'll sort of want to know what efforts have we made to contact the employee, and have we heard from them at all. So that applies for on campus or remote.
Thanks, Brad.
Great. Any additional questions for Brad?
Hey, this is Lynette Brandon. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the FAST line. I understand it's an imminent threat, but I've had experiences where faculty just feel uncomfortable with a person. So if you could maybe dig into that a little bit more. Or what if we call and it shouldn't have been a call?
Sure. Yeah, better to be safe than sorry, but the majority of the contexts that the FAST team gets are not at the sort of level of threat to others or threat to self, but we'd rather catch more and sort of sort through them. And oftentimes it is, as you described, Lynette, sort of some sort of performance issue or interpersonal issue. So we'll want to make contact to sort of talk more about what exactly the supervisor is looking at. And there's a difference between physical safety and psychological safety, or however you want to put that. But we find that, we can provide some options. Perhaps one of you are sitting with the supervisor when they're conducting meetings with the employee. Ideally, the supervisor should be able to meet with an employee one-on-one in any circumstance, because once you start putting a third party in the room, it can feel like a Band-Aid. And then again, is there an off-ramp for that? But an employee, if it's an employee side, I don't feel safe meeting with my supervisor. I need to have somebody present. I need to have HR present. I need to have ombuds present. I need to have a mediator present. The employee is not entitled to have a representative in a routine meeting with the supervisor. So we can hold our ground on that a bit. But we generally try to get it to a place where eventually the supervisor is meeting one-on-one with the employee. That answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
And if it's physical safety concern, it's totally different ball of wax. We might be talking about involving the police, paid admin leave, anti-violence investigation, things of that nature. So different story if it's physical violent concerns.
So given that I cannot force people to take crucial conversations, like I wish I could, a lot of these supervisors are not, they didn't go to school to be managers, right? So they just don't have the skills. So how can we as business partners support them better to have these conversations? Because there are many faculty that I would not let have a one-on-one conversation with their staff if it was going to be something really critical like this.
Yeah. Love that question, because it's something that my team does a whole lot of, that it's kind of hard sometimes for me to quantify how much of it we do, but we spend a lot of time coaching supervisors on these conversations before they happen. Sometimes we're even sort of, scripting conversations out or doing role play. Oftentimes we're sort of helping with the written communication as well, reviewing draft follow-up emails before the supervisor sends them out. So they are, the most effective. So that's something that we really kind of get deeply involved in, is helping supervisors navigate those difficult conversations successfully, because you're right. none of us really took any sort of training for this. And, you know, we have faculty who have gone to school for 30 years but they haven't taken a single conflict resolution course. And then they really struggle with these conversations. So, thank you, Kim, for that unpaid endorsement. But, yeah, we love to help in those situations.
Hey, can I respond to Agata, please? So, Agata, the Department of Medicine does have some recorded training for PIs. It was implemented by Tate Hermanson, and I can just reshare that information with our DOM partners.
And there is the management certification cohort. So that's not just for staff, but you know, we do have that as an option. And crucial conversations, I would encourage you to encourage everyone in your department who supervises anyone to take crucial conversations. And we're looking at ways of expanding access to that.
Yep, and Department of Medicine is getting their own little training with all of the HR units. My team and our piece is in February, but yeah, we are at your beck and call.
Anything else for Brad? Going once, going twice. All right, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you have a great holiday season. Don't work too hard next week, and we'll see you in January. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last minute questions?
Deanna, I can email you, but I had just sent you a message. And then I got a weird response on email. So let me just forward you the response I got.
Okay.
And then maybe we can have discuss
Okay.
that.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kelly.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks everyone.